So what has been your experience of coaching?
I want to say it's a positive experience, but I wouldn't say it's always been positive. They never really give you an answer. You're there with a completely different result. I literally couldn't believe it. And so what a massive blind spot I had.
There's been some sort of debate or conversation around the role of AI in a space that we work with in terms of people and culture, and specifically, say, in coaching, because we're doing about coaching. What do you believe that AI has a space in that has a role in the coaching space? And so what has been your experience of coaching?
I have to say I actually really like coaching, and I'd say I want to say it's a positive experience, but I wouldn't say it's always been positive. I think the overall outcome has been positive, but there's definitely been times when I found it quite infuriating.
Yeah. And what was it about it that was so infuriating?
I think like the good coaches that I've engaged with over the years, they never really give you an answer that you can take away to do something with immediately. So particularly, after I got used to this, it's okay because I was used to it and I knew what to expect. But I think the first few times I went into it, I was really hoping that I'd be able to turn up with a problem, tell the person my problem, and then in the space of what seemed to be an excessively long time of an hour, they would be able to tell me, here's the 5-step process that you need to solve that problem. And then I'll be able to ask questions, but I didn't understand step 2 for whatever reason. And that would be the end of the episode, and I'd be able to move on with my life. But it was actually not what happened at all. And particularly the first few times, I found that exceptionally frustrating. Yeah.
Well, that much explains it for Jenny, who's ever really involved or engaged in some shape, way, or form of a good coach. It's a good coach. Because we had a business owner reach out a few months ago saying, we're just looking at coaching, and we went and had a conversation to understand where they are and why they were a coach. And he's like, we actually had a coach that we just sacked, and we're like, oh, but good for us. That's when we actually opportunity for us. Yeah, green light. But then when we started to actually have conversation around what problems they're trying to solve, and it kind of led us to conversation about why they sacked the other person. And it's like, I just want someone to come and tell my people this because I want to get. And then we're like, you will be selecting after today. So we sort of had to really work then with the business owner around the very understanding of what actually the coaching is and helping them unpack, perhaps, is this what you're actually looking for in terms of investment? Because while it would have been easy for us as, obviously coaches, and we are wanting to work with that and make a shift and a change in that organization. But it was one of those for us that's to say, no, actually, maybe that is not the best fit, or perhaps we can help you in a different way than what we're looking for. So that journey definitely is important to understand that what it feels like when someone is receiving it, and that may well be what they then told the boss in terms of why that this is not helping us, and the boss translation of that is, I've invested in this and it's not working.
Yeah. Jeff, just gonna lean into something that you said there. So you talked about coaching, what was happening in the session, and obviously your frustrations with not getting the answers that you wanted, but also you talked about what happened out of the sessions. And I think that's something again that's that people don't really understand, that the 1 hour of coaching really is, it is what it is, and there's the question, but it is actually what happens outside of the session. I find often where some of those insights come, or the shifts in behavior.
Yep.
Are you able to talk about anything that you can recall specifically, or what happened out of the session that you were aware of?
Yes. I talk about something that happened probably in the second session, maybe even the first one. I know I was in the first. It was a very intense time when I got engaged in that. But effectively, I was having this interpersonal conflict at my job at the time, and I was convinced that the person on the other side of the table was really like, and we had all of the evidence to prove it. I had like taken a record of all of the things that were happening with this person, and so I was ready to go. And so my question to my coach was like, how do I get this person to agree with me so that I can move on with this thing that we're both involved in, because I'm tired of dealing with this. And so, my coach infuriatingly didn't really answer that question, just kept asking me questions about it. And in the end, we worked out a framework that because I had this meeting with the person I was in conflict with every week. So by the time I came back to the next session, we had agreed upon I would take a new framework for approaching this person, and I would use that framework, and I would I would do my best to change my thinking around that person. So I wouldn't just go in there and be like, you're wrong, I'm right, let's move on. And so the homework was I had to go into this next meeting, go through this framework with this person, and then just come back to the coach with the results. And based on whatever those results were, we go to the next stage. As it turned out, I went to this meeting, and I'm going to say this in the right way. It's like, it was almost like I had the same meeting, because literally by this point in time, the two people, the person I was in conflict with, like, we were just headbutting the whole time. And the next meeting I had with him, it went in the completely different direction in a positive way. And to the point where I wouldn't say that I got everything that I wanted in a negative sense, but we actually found that we agreed on significantly more than we disagreed on. And based on that agreement, we were able to start progressing the project that we're both involved in there. But the thing is, because these meetings had basically turned into an hour long, we basically already knew the script that each of us were going to play. Like, it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe that literally all that I'd done is changed my internal believing, my internal process a little bit, put in place this very simple framework that I still use today with agreed upon it with my coach, like agreed to try it. I ended up with a completely different result. Like, I literally couldn't believe it. And so that was probably the reason why I continued on with that coaching, because I just thought to myself, like, what a massive blind spot I had. I wonder how many other areas of my life this thing applies to. So, I mean, that was just a very obvious one where I had some very clear homework. I mean, I will comment on the irony of paying people to give me homework, but it worked, so I'm good with it.
It comes. As a coach, James, it is the feedback. I do get a lot, but I think part of the role of a coach is to create that accountability, and so that accountability and that work that happens out of the session is where you get you get traction and you get movement and you get shift. And there's a really great practical example that I think everybody can relate to. And also the beauty of coaching, sometimes it's a simple reframing of something that you're stuck in to help you move forward. Have you ever, as a business owner, do you invest in coaching for your team?
I have used what I learned from that coaching over and over again for tremendously positive results in the business. Even though as an organization, I'd like to get to a point where we had a coaching culture. That just wasn't how it happened. But yeah, I would say it was exceptionally effective, and even the ability to understand how the people in my team were thinking so that I could change how I would approach explaining a situation, to explain it in language that made sense to them, like, tremendously helpful. Like, I think I referred to that thing, I don't know, every month.
Yeah. So you're talking about the Clifton Strengths Assessment and then the team group that gave you an understanding of everyone's strengths across your team. Yeah. What would you say to business owners who are considering investing in coaching some of their people or creating that culture of coaching in their workplace? What would you say based on your experience to them?
I think for me, framing coaching, I think for me, I would say that coaching is largely about how you frame where you want to go in your organization. I think in organizations, there's multiple competing priorities that you have to balance, particularly as a business owner, where kind of you're the linchpin in a lot of ways that holds that all together until you build like a good executive team around yourself. So, I mean, ultimately, your business has to be profitable and you have to be, making money day to day. That's really important because without, that money coming in, your business doesn't survive. But at some point in time, your business reaches a stage where the basics are running well. Like your marketing is, effective to a certain level, but you've quantified it. That's then you're able to deliver that well. So I think at that point in time, that's when you start to think about, okay, now that my business is running ish, it's not going to die tomorrow. How do I start to level up my organization? And you can do that through lots of different strategies. I won't go into all of them or else we'll be here all day. But one of those strategies is to start building capacity within your leadership team and yourself. And depending on what organization you're in, you could even extend that all the way down to like your line employees. It just kind of depends where you're at. But ultimately, building capacity is one of the ways you can grow your business, and it can be quite a rewarding and effective way, particularly if you really feel like you've got a strong leadership core that you want to keep working with. That can be a really powerful way to help them start to see opportunities differently, how to run their teams more effectively. Like what I've seen happen around me is that when my leaders, maybe they didn't use exactly coaching, but when they start to engage in coaching adjacent frameworks, so they start to engage with people who are able to challenge them on how they think, how they do things, they inevitably what I start to see happen with them is they are able to ask better questions. They go from why is this process not working to, okay, what are the things that this process is made up of? How do I improve this aspect of it? And so you end up with like almost like this internal self-optimization that starts to happen. And as they build that capacity, then what used to take 80 to 90% of their time really reduces down to like 50 to 60%. Suddenly they've got that extra 20% margin to start looking into like, what are the new opportunities for me, for my team, for my business? So one of the ways you can build your business is to really enable your team to stretch and grow. But I think you also have to be aware that if you're going to be doing that for your team, like you also need to be engaging in that process. Like it's not like the only reason your business isn't growing in that way is because your team isn't good enough. Like you have to change as well. So I think in a way you have to be aware that when you, well, not have to be, but if you want to engage that as a way to grow your business, it has to be quite holistic. Like that means it has to feed into you telling your teams, like when you have this time with your coach, that hour, no one's allowed to contact you during that, like setting that expectation is very practical. Turn your Slack off, whatever other notifications you get, or turn it all off. Like that hour is really important, and I'm going to make sure that you have that space to do it. So,
Correct. Thanks, Jane.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
So there's I know you are an expert in the area, in the tech area, and I know that you do a lot of work around AI and how we can leverage that. And it's something that Michelle and I are, we're work in progress. Put it nicely. I think there's been some sort of debate or conversation around the role of AI and in a space that we work with in terms of people and culture, and specifically say in coaching, because we are doing about coaching. What do you believe that AI has a space in that has a role in the coaching space, and how might that look like?
It's a really good question, and in fact, I get asked this question a lot by business owners. I'm actually presenting in a few weeks' time to a bunch of CEOs on the topic. I think there's different ways to think about this, and it's almost like a hierarchy of thought around it. At its core, I think that AI is a positive development for humanity. I think any time in history where you see the ability for people to consume and explore knowledge more effectively, you see a huge explosion in innovation, and you generally see quite world-shifting things happen. So If you think back to the Renaissance, when the printing press was invented, suddenly people had the ability to take books that used to be handwritten and take days to write, and they could now make 500 in the time that it took to do one. That then enabled learning to be integrated into schooling systems, which was itself a societal change because public schooling wasn't available then. And so it enabled the exploration and recording of knowledge to be vastly expanded compared to where it was. It took it from something that only elite people could access down to the middle class, and over time, down to the poor as well. So I think fundamentally we have to be aware that with AI, suddenly all of the world's knowledge is available for people to explore in a very targeted way just through the interface with a chat, like a chatbot type thing. And that's a hugely positive development for humanity in general. The challenge is that where you have professional skill-based industries or knowledge-based industries that have built their profession around the ability to provide that knowledge, that's kind of completely eliminated by AI. And that's a real challenge for those people. We could always, it's easy to take a step back and say, well, in the long arc of history, the Industrial Revolution created far more jobs than people ever lost. But you're talking about a 150-year period where a lot of people lost their jobs, and that's where social welfare was birthed because so many people lost their jobs. They were, it was creating issues. So I think framing it in that way created far more jobs than people ever lost. But you were talking about a 150-year period where a lot of people lost their jobs, and that's where social welfare was birthed because so many people lost their jobs. They were, was creating issues. So I think framing it in that way, you then come to coaching. And from what I've picked up talking to you guys about coaching is a skill, and it's based on knowledge or evidence, and it has a practical application, which is the challenging part. I don't think you'd ever really be able to get an AI to the point where it can effectively challenge people. It can simulate challenge, but it's based without getting into the technical details, like AI is simply a mathematical way of linking things together. So it can't create new ways of thinking. It's just going to copy what other people have done. Whether or not you could ever get an AI chatbot to the point where it could do what you guys do in sessions where you understand a person and you ask the right questions at the right time, don't know. But where I think it will be challenging for coaches is that you don't have to explain a framework anymore. Someone can just go, tell me about Clifton's drinks, or I think you mentioned grow. Tell me about grow.
Yeah.
And it's going to give them an opinionated view on what that actually is. So I think if your coaching business is built on explaining to people what those things are and the benefits of it, I think you're probably on a timer of about 3 to 5 years. Yeah. But you can leverage that as well, which I suppose is the other side of the coin. There is an opportunity there as well, because if you're able to figure out what a business model looks like, assuming that, then in 3 to 5 years, you're very well positioned to prosper from that. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, definitely to answer a question. I think different professional jobs that sort of, similar to coaching, counseling, therapy, that sort of roles there've been a lot of debate around role of AI. And while there's a recognition of the positive impact it's having, there's also the real anxiety around what it means for me personally, what it means for the business. But I like the perspective of actually understanding while that might be, that also poses a real opportunity and to start to think about what that looks like and why it's actually really making all of us to review what we do and the value that it adds. And as you said, if the model is just based on explaining concept, which can be explainable by a machine, then perhaps we might need to start to think about where do you add the value and the depth in terms of what you offer to people, which I think would be a great thing for coaches to coach ourselves and start having those sort of discussions in our network and really embrace AI, but also understand the value that we also add.
Yeah, I think what I am starting to observe, and this is just my opinion, there's billions of dollars getting invested in figuring out new monetization frameworks in the age of AI. But I think what it's starting to demonstrate is that people are interested in authentic stories. I think what you start to find, where knowledge, in an era where knowledge is so freely available, if you think about the 1940s and the 1950s, they would have been blown away by what we could get with Google. But in another 20 years from now, people are going to be blown away. Like, we are going to look at what you can get from AI and feel the same thing, even though we came from an age where knowledge was already exploding. In that kind of environment, I think what we start to see happen is people are interested in the authenticity of the story. The exact accuracy of the information that's getting presented is important, and I don't want to downplay the importance and the detrimental impact of like fake news and those kind of things. But in an era where the access to knowledge is so vast, it's the how you, the person, are getting impacted by that knowledge that matters to people. And I think that in many industries like coaching and counseling is another one, where that's a good one, that provides a huge opportunity. That means you can scale. Like, when you have an effective framework that allows people to engage with that activity to change themselves on the inside, you can scale that to where before it was very limited to how much time you had to go and do that. Now you can scale an effective framework to millions of people. And that's a huge opportunity, not just to make money. I mean, that's important because we all need to live and like have money to do that. But it's also a tremendous opportunity to fundamentally influence the world. And we have a very small window of time to figure out who, in my opinion, what's going to happen is in every industry, there's going to be one or two major players who end up dominating the world, because their ability to scale what they're doing is literally, people just need an internet connection. I mean, it's crazy. Like, you could be talking now and someone could connect through Starlink in a country that you've never even heard of, and they can access a framework that works for them. That's before it would have required someone to travel to that area, and they may not have access to all of the same travel opportunities that we had now. Now they just need to connect to the internet, and it's available globally. So I think, from a business perspective, we had this small window of opportunity to become one of those dominant players in the industry, and then we can scale the influence that we have. So I think it's a hugely positive thing, but it's hard. Like, if you're coming from that legacy way of doing things, it doesn't fit in mental models, and that means you're going to have to figure out what a new mental model is.
Yeah. But I think it was just reflecting on conversations that we had over a few episodes around what coaching is, and understanding it's not really about telling and giving the answer, which is what a machine will give you. It's the messiness of the process and being able to hold that, and lots of self-discovery throughout that people actually, it's the experience that people are seeking for when they come for coaching, and actually shifting that mindset of understanding the machine cannot replicate the humanness of that approach. But I think it requires us as coaches to be able to really understand exactly the models that we're using and where we personally add the value that cannot be replaced on machine, and actually,
I think I wouldn't say I'd challenge that, but I think when I'm listening to you say that, that sounds to me like you're really just trying to apply a legacy way of thinking to a new technology. Another way that you could think about this is an AI, particularly if you own and control it, can ask the simple questions that now you would, I say waste time in the context of, imagine if there's a way for the simple questions that you ask. I don't know what they are. I don't know much about doing the coaching process. I just know it as a receiver of coaching. But I imagine there's a certain series of questions that would be quite helpful, that if you knew that up front, it would turbocharge the outcomes that you're able to get from a coaching session. And maybe there's a way to leverage an AI that has access to the resources that would help people arrive at those things that they could engage with on a daily basis. Like, part of their homework could be talking to the AI, and at the end, like every time they come to a session, like you end up with some sort of summary of the sorts of questions they've been asking for the last 2 weeks or whatever the period of time was. And so you can focus your session more on those questions that are getting asked and answered by the AI. And if you're controlling the information that the AI is using to answer those questions, I'm not talking about answers in the asking versus telling way, but if someone's like, how I deal with this situation, the AI comes back with some articles that you've written about some of the things they can think about and consider. That actually allows you to maximize the benefit that people are getting from the 1 hour of your time which could in turn allow them to scale their ability to impact in the future. And if you could imagine a way to do that minimizes your in-person time with that person while maximizing the amount of benefit that they get from that, all of a sudden you could find that where before you could only see 20 clients because you had to spend an hour after every session getting all your notes together, and suddenly now you can see 40 clients. Or maybe there's a way for you to see 100 clients because you've, like, those are the sorts of things, and I had no clue how you would do that from a coaching perspective. But I think if you were to sit down and challenge yourself with that question, like, how could I use AI to scale what I'm doing to millions of people? I think the people who figured that answer out end up with being the dominant player in their industries, and it's impossible to dislodge them.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm certainly going to need some coaching over that one because I agree with you, James. I think it is definitely the way forward, and you better to be on the bus than standing back thinking that it's all stop. It's there's too much human interface and it's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that definitely food for thought.